Hi everyone, it's Paul again. I'm here to show you the next step in my process of restoring the Majestic fountain pen. Today I'm going to install a new ink sac. Now you probably remember from my previous videos that the feed has been cleaned up on the inside and the outside. You'll notice particularly the area here with these vertical lines, or horizontal, I guess, depending on which way you look. These are actually textured a little bit. You probably can't see them, but there's a slight amount of bumpiness to them, which I'm guessing was probably done to help make the ink sac stick better to it when it's glued. The ink sac is going to be attached by shellac from here back and will fit on to the inside of the pen barrel. Now I have installed the new J bar, which you may remember from a previous video. I showed you the new replacement bar. It has been installed in the new in the pen in its proper location, and I'm going to try and see if I can show you. That's the bar in there. That's the end of the bar. And way in the back, is butting up against the back end of the pen, is the curved part that allows it to act as a spring. Let me see if I can show you how this works. For those of you who don't know how a lever pen works, the lever operates this way, and in so doing, if I'm lucky enough to be able to show you, that motion compresses the spring of the spring action of the J bar, and that in turn causes the ink sac, the little rubber sac that will be in there, to compress, and when it's released, the ink will flow in. And ink sacs are actually still being manufactured. The Pen Sac company is the go-to source. They have kept alive an old pen sac factory, the last pen sac factory operating in the United States, I believe. The people who operate it bought the machinery and the remaining supplies of material, and several of the people who work there have come out of retirement to keep pen sac manufacturing alive. So this is their sample pack, different sizes. And I used to know what the numbers stood for, and I'm blanking right now. So in a future video, I'll explain, or if somebody knows, they can put it in the comments and refresh my memory and save my embarrassment for not remembering. But basically what I'm going to do is pick a sac that will, as you can see, they're soft and flexible, pliable. You trim them to length and insert them in the barrel. What you typically want to do is pick a sac that is somewhat narrower than the full length of the barrel. It's you don't want the maximum thickness or the maximum width. It's a little counterintuitive, but part of the reason is because you have that J bar inside there, that takes up a certain amount of space, and you want the sac to be able to fit all the way down to the end of the pen without bumping, conflicting against that sharp edge, which might cause it to tear. So if it's pressed up against it too tight. So that's why you want to pick a sac that's a little bit narrower. So I will be picking a sac out off the video and showing you what I pick in just a few minutes. Well, I've picked a winner in the pen sac lottery, and it's this sac here. I don't know the size, but it's actually, as you can see, considerably smaller than the diameter of the pen, which is sometimes a surprise to people when they discover just how small the ink sacs are compared to the diameter of the pen. When you're working with a lever filler, that's occupational hazard, and I believe that's one of the reasons that other methods of filling fountain pens came along later, was to better take advantage of the full width of the barrel. Piston fillers, for example, don't, or at least many of the ones that I've seen, do not have ink sacs, so they're able to take care of make full use of the full width of the barrel. So this is just a test fit, but you'll see why I picked this, because it's able to fit right cleanly inside without having to be pushed in or anything, requiring any force. So it won't snag on the J-bar when the lever is operated. So that's a good example right there of the difference in diameters. I'm probably being a bit more conservative than I need to be. I probably could go maybe a diameter larger, but to avoid any problems at this point, I'm going to stick with that one. And now I am going to trim it to fit to size. You typically trim a ink sac twice, once to fit inside the barrel and once to accommodate the feed, the length of the feed that projects into the pen. Because of the fitting of the J-bar inside the pen, which is basically all the way at the back of the pen, I'm able to use pretty much the full length of the sac to begin with. As you saw when I inserted the sac, it was pretty much flush with the front of the barrel. So the only thing I really have to take care of accommodating is the length of the feed that actually is inserted in the pen. Of course, it's rather clumsy when I have a camera mounted on a tripod in front of my face, but basically this portion of the feed is going to be inside the barrel, so I have to trim the sac roughly about that much. So once again, I'm going to do that off camera so that I don't bump and jostle and make a mistake. But in a moment, you'll see the results, and hopefully they'll be nice and clean. Well, I've trimmed the ink sac, and it's ready to be test fitted onto the feed. So what I'm going to do, the easiest way to do that is to stretch it. Sometimes I can do that by hand. Sometimes I prefer to use some tools to help with the stretching. As you can see, the ink sac's very flexible, so stretching does not hurt it. And let's see. Oh, it would help if I could not drop it too, I suppose. Let's see if I can do this with the camera in front of me. It's often easier to do by hand, but it's not as elegant and it's not quite photogenic for video. So that's a basic approximation right there. And what I need to do is work it on all the way to the end so that the end of the sac here is butted up against the edge, this edge of the feed right here. And I had test fitted it before and I know it works. So what I need to do next is repeat this, but after coating the end of the nib, the end of the feed, this section here, with shellac. And I get my shellac from Pendemonium, which is a terrific vendor of all kinds of great fountain pen tools and equipment. I highly recommend them. They're very good to deal with, very fast and responsive. Like the pen sac company people, they are fans at heart, so they are responsive to the needs of fountain pen restoration people and collectors everywhere. So I'm going to basically do that offline again so that I don't risk messing anything up. But basically what you do is you have this wonderful shellac, which is basically furniture shellac, but in smaller quantities. I mean, the amounts you use on an individual pen are such that if you buy a quart of the stuff or even a half quart, you're going to end up probably losing most of it to being dried out before you ever get around to using it. So Pendemonium sells it to you in nicer, smaller quantities with a handy brush. And you may remember from previous video that I said that one of the unexpected benefits of working on a fountain pen is that when you're working close to your face, you get to smell the different things, metals, plastics, rubbers, glues. they have very distinctive scents. And the shellac that I am using has a wonderful aroma that smells a lot like a really good liqueur. So at the risk of spending way too much time shellacking my ink sacs, I do enjoy that part of the process when it comes around time to it. So I'm actually happy to be doing that. But I will be doing that offline, and we'll show you the results when I'm done. Well, what turned out to be a bit longer than I thought, it went by very quickly for you, I'm sure, because you didn't get to see me huffing and puffing and twisting and turning to try and get this thing to fit, because of course, how goes it always, right? With test fittings, everything went smoothly. And of course, when it comes time to actually put it on, things go haywire, because that's just inevitably the nature of things. But here it is now, attached. A little bit of extra shellac on the outside that just happened to ooze over while I was putting it on, but I don't think that's going to cause any problems. And now I have to let the shellac dry, and it's probably 24 to 48 hours worth of sitting here by itself, letting it slowly dry and adhere. The nice thing about shellac is that it's really easy to remove. A little bit of heat and a little bit of pressure, and I would be able to remove this if I needed to. That's you saw the remains of the old sack when that sack that was dried up and crunchy over here and came out in little dried up chunks when I emptied the barrel a couple videos ago. It once looked like this: supple, pliable, and brand new. So that's what 50, 60 years stuck inside of a pen, being exposed to inks repeatedly, will do to you, especially if some of that ink is allowed to dry in there. So hopefully we won't let that happen to this ink sac for quite a long time. But the next step, when it gets to that time, will be to insert this into the barrel and commit it. The fit is very tight, so I'm not going to have to shellac this portion of the feed to get it to stay in. Sometimes you do that if the materials have shrunk and expanded to the point where they just don't give you a very tight fit. Fortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case in this one. I am not going to go put this in the barrel quite yet for two reasons. One, I haven't polished the exterior of the barrel yet. That's going to be a future step, which I'll cover. And also because I haven't cleaned the inside of the barrel very well yet. The J-bar that's in there now is there for test fit purposes, so that I could measure the length and diameter of the ink sac. But I'm going to take the J-bar out and give the inside a thorough cleaning with a Q-tip and some mild cleansing liquid, either that magic water ammonia dish soap combination or something else, maybe just doing it dry rather than risk causing any kind of water damage. Depending on the type of material that the barrel's made of, might react badly to. So one thing I haven't pointed out before is you'll notice that the barrel does have initials. I believe it's DGG, or maybe it's DGG, previous owner. And when it comes time to polishing the barrel, I'm going to put a little piece of tape over that, so that when I'm sanding, that'll be protected from the abrasion of the sandpaper that I use. It's called micro mesh, and I'll talk about that in the future video when I talk about polishing. But that's where we are right now. We have another stage accomplished, and I will keep updating you when I do the next steps. Thanks, and see you then.